Hello everybody, welcome to the Interesting Modelling Company Midweek Review. As you may have noticed tonight, I'm flying solo because Spencer is off Spencering. Well, Drew isn't well, so we do wish him a speedy recovery. So I'm going to be doing a solo spot tonight. And well, what I'm going to talk about is actually some of the new Humbrol acrylics, the second gen ones, which I've got here. So I thought what we'll do is we'll talk about them. We'll do some live demonstrations, which is always fraught with problems, but never mind. That's Blue Peter syndrome, that was. So we'll do some live demonstrations and just talk about those acrylics for the first part of the show. Then the second half, I thought we'd just have a Q&A, or, just throw some questions at me, really. So if we switch over to the work cam camera, which is this one here, this is going to be my test mule tonight, which is just it's the bottom hull of a Type 45 destroyer, I do believe. And I'll be brushing some of these acrylics on, and I'll also be airbrushing some as well, which is exciting. So let me just go and grab the paints a second, which of course he didn't put on the desk. Oh, goodness me. So let's talk about these new Humbrol second gen acrylics, of which we've got a goodly selection here. Now, first thing you'll notice is on the packaging, it distinctly says Gen 2. And the colors we've got here, which are some of the early testers to try out, we've got 128, which I do believe that's a light gold grey. We've got 65 matte, which is the equivalent of RLM 65. We've got 78 matte, which is cockpit green. Then we have 90, which is the equivalent to sky. And then we have 129, which I think is US ghost grey, I think. I forget what these numbers are. That's always a good start. 116, which is matte US dark green. And then finally 165, which is matte medium sea grey. So I've had a go with these brush painting these. I've also had a go airbrushing them as well, which you can probably see on this test mule here. That's where I was airbrushing the 90 Sky. So I thought what we'll do tonight is we'll brush some on, and then we'll go back and we'll actually do some live airbrushing. Bum, bum, bum. So let's get the camera set up a bit better. So what can I say about these? These are a new they're a new formula. I have been playing around with these, and I've got to say they do brush better. They've got much more time to work with them, and they dry slightly slower, which means you can work the surface and kind of eliminate brush strokes, really. So what should we make a start with? I tell you what, we'll actually try airbrushing try brushing the matte 90, then we'll come back and then we'll do a bit of airbrushing with that, and we'll try airbrushing some of the other colors as well. But the first thing is give it a good shake. And then we'll deposit some into the palette here, like so. Now, some of these do come out fairly thin in the first place. Others do need a little bit of thinning. I think this one is pretty much as thin as you want it for brush painting. So we'll go straight in there and we'll brush a coat on. Now, that is quite thin, but the beauty of this is you can actually kind of build up a second coat relatively quickly. The one thing I will say is that, as I say, that slightly slower drying time means you're able to just work the surface a bit more. And as you can see, where I initially put that on, it was a little bit streaky. It's actually drying. It's actually kind of going on a little bit more opaquely. But with these kind of things, you really do need to put two coats on, really. But this is quite a pale colour, and that's not too bad. In fact, in the best Blue Peter traditions, I will do the here's one we did earlier when I can find it. Lol. Here we go. Problem having a tidy up in the workshop. Here's one that we prepared earlier, and that is the 90 Sky, and that is 2 coats, which isn't too bad. In fact, on the other wing, we've got 2 coats there of the 65 light blue, which has gone down quite nicely. So I said to Humbrol in trying these that they really should be aiming to do a paint which is brushable, because I think that's the strength of these acrylics, rather than trying to make something which is, you know, kind of like, you know, you can fall between 2 stools of doing something that's trying to be a brushable paint and something that can be airbrushable as well. In my opinion, the best paints for airbrushing, I think, are something with either an alcohol base or a lacquer base. I think pure water-based acrylics can sometimes be problematical when you want to airbrush them, but not impossible. And of course, the beauty of these acrylics is that's that coat I've just brushed on, and that is actually touch dry, which means I can go in there, load the paintbrush up, and actually go in there and put another coat on. And bear in mind, it is very, very warm out there tonight. But because they're acrylic, they're water-based acrylics, so they don't actually have any aggressive solvents in them. Obviously, water is a solvent of some sort, but they don't have any aggressive solvents. You can brush on a fairly decent coat within minutes of it being touch dry. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. That's certainly a better result than I've ever had with the old acrylics, and certainly with some of the enamels out there, that's a better result I've had with enamel. So like I say, I'm trying to test these through the eyes of somebody who's not an airbrusher. So these are for, you know, kind of like, I'm trying to look at these as non-enthusiast paints, if you see what I mean, trying to broaden this out to the more general public. But yeah, that was 2 coats, and that's not bad. I like that. We'll try another color whilst we've got the palette out here. So what I'm going to do is just give the brush a quick wipe, and I will come back to your comments in a second. So bear with me, folks. And we'll try the 65 dark blue, light blue as well, rather. So let's have a look. Let's see what comments we've got going here at the moment. Jeff Baker says, do they have an agitator in the bottle like a ball bearing? No, Jeff, they don't. I've tried opening them up to put a ball bearing in there, but I've not really kind of like had a real chance to kind of prise the tops off. But no ball bearing in there. But I got to say, I put them in my Robard paint shaker here, but they do actually kind of shake down quite nicely without an agitator. The only thing I'm not too keen on these acrylics, and it's something that I fed back to Hornby and to the people doing the Humbrol range for them, is I'm not a big fan of these nozzles because they tend to flood. I just think the shape it's not great for these kinds of bottles. So, you know, I'm feeding back to them honest and critical feedback. So here we go. We've got the 65, which is the light blue, and We'll slap a bit on this side. So here you can see here we've actually got quite a, where this is a test bed, we've actually got quite a lot of contrasting colours there. So this will test how opaque this goes on, and then how opaque subsequent coats will be. But I think the crucial thing that I was interested in checking is when they're being brushed on, is how long have you got to work them before they start kind of dragging on the paintbrush, that's when you can start getting, you know, brush marks and tide marks and things like that. But I got to say, they actually do have quite a decent working time. I mean, I'm just doing this at the moment just to see when I'm going to get a little bit of drag start kicking in. But that's actually quite good. So that was just one coat, as you saw, applied live on the internet, and we'll let that dry for a few more minutes, and then we'll slap another coat on. Or in fact, I could, whilst that's drying, like I say, this one here, that was two coats there. You can see where you've just got that little bit of discoloration there from the second coat. So what I am going to do is just put a third coat on, and these aren't, I haven't thinned these either. These are coming out of the bottle purely as is. So we will very quickly brush another color on and just make sure we get it all into all the panel detail, and then we can just brush out and smooth it off a bit, which that's about it. That's the heat of that is starting to drag now. But Anthony, that's a good question from Anthony. Anthony says, you are covering existing paint, JM. How do they perform on raw plastic with no primer, please? Very good point. I will do that in a second. The reason why I'm covering it with primer, doing it over primer, is that's how I will work. But yes, that's a very good point, Anthony. And what have we got there? That's got some that there is raw plastic. That's not primer or anything. So what we'll do is we'll get the blue and we'll brush that on there, and then we'll go at the other side and do the sky. But there you go. I'm just smoothing that out a bit. There you go, Anthony. That's one coat over raw plastic. And we'll do the sky on the other side. I'm not going to wet the brush in the jar of water I've got here, so I'm just going to be wiping it dry and then using the next color. So again, this is going over raw plastic. There you go. One coat over raw plastic. So yeah, that's a good point. Anthony says, looks good. Was thinking as a new builder, you might go straight to paint and these look fine. Yeah, I think one of the problems you can get with acrylics sometimes is if you're putting them on over raw plastic, if they're a bit too watery, then they will start to bead up on the surface. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to wash the brush out too much in between coats, because once the brush gets wet, that's exactly what it will start doing. But we're going to just clean that out a second, and then we can go in and put some more coats in. So, and in fact, there you go. That is already touch dry, that. Yeah. So they're slow enough that you can work them with the paintbrush, but then once they actually start drying, they do dry quite rapidly. So what we'll do is that certainly is dry there. So we will go in there and do a second coat of the 65 light blue. So there you go. Second coat. Mike Clages says, will it thin down to make a glaze? I don't see why not, Mike. I don't see why not. These are, I'm still in the early days of kind of like trying these out, but I don't see why it shouldn't work that way. Although bear in mind, my attempts to do glazes with figure painting are still in a very early stage, but I don't see why not. And like I say, we'll try one of the other colours here. We'll try the 116 matte dark green. So we'll give it a good shake up, and we'll try it on another part of this test bed here. Whoops, now you can see how thick that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush that. That is exceptionally thick. That I'm going to brush that out, and then what I will do is I will add a couple of drops, if only one drop, of the we're testing out a new formula of the acrylic thinners. So, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to brush this straight on and see how that goes, and then determine then if I need to thin it anymore. So let's get a good dollop of that. That does seem very, very thick, mind you. Probably could do with a little bit of thinning, but let's just slap it on and see what happens. And I think the arbiter is how soon does it actually start to drag on the surface as the paint starts drying? To which the answer is that's actually got quite a nice bit of lead time to it. It's almost like brushing old-fashioned Humbrol enamels. So yeah, that's we've brushed a coat on there. That's now just starting to drag a little bit. That could probably do with being thinned a bit more. So what we will do is we'll add a drop of thinner to it this side. That is going to make it a little bit more, probably a little bit more translucent, but it will certainly make it a little bit easier to brush. So one drop of thinner, that'll do. And then see, almost immediately that feels so much better to paint. That just feels really creamy on the you know, you can feel how smooth that's going down without a tendency for the brush to want to start digging in as the paint starts to dry. I think the new thinners may have some kind of wetting agent in them or some kind of retardant in them which assists this kind of task. But there you go, that's one coat. In fact, that one on that side has actually now dried. So so yeah, imagine you are kind of like a beginner and you don't have much luck with painting, or you're still on the early steps. You want something which you can kind of rely on. Bye bye spider. And yeah, I think that is not bad. I'm just going to up the brightness here a second. There we go, that's better. So yeah, I've been, like I said, I've been testing these kind of all week on various, various models and things, and by and large, I'm not having the same level of problems I used to have with not with the old acrylics that were in the old acrylics that came in the screw jars. Certainly, since they've gone over to the these kind of dropper bottles, they work considerably better. But I'm liking these ones. They're not giving me too many problems. But I've yet to really kind of like put them to an absolute test in building, actually using them for painting a whole system, say like a figure or whatever. But I haven't got the colors to do that at the moment. But Jim Altegott says, I found Vallejo needs paint underneath it. If not, they can literally be rubbed off the surface. Yeah, absolutely. And I've got somebody who is trying to FaceTime me at the moment, and I've just got to God. Decline, and I've just got to say, doing a live show. Right, let's turn FaceTime off. System preferences. All right, bear with me a sec, folks. I've just got to deal with this a sec. Goodness me, some people don't get the hint. There will be an intermission here, folks. Bear with me a sec. Some people don't get the hint. Lols. Yes, I'm going to say you can watch paint dry. Indeed, you can watch paint dry. So what we are going to do now is, right, what was it? Question from Mike before I was so rudely interrupted. He said, how well do they mix with each other for making other shades for figure painting? No great problems, Mike. You can mix them together. There's no issues there at all. Bear in mind that you always get a thing with acrylics when you're doing when you get some colors you can will brush much easier. Other colors can be a bit tricky. So things like yellows can always be a little bit translucent, whereas colors like blacks and greens, they can just go on absolutely solidly. Stan Codling says, the painting properties remind me of original Humber Authentics, and I think if they sold them as a nation-specific set like the Authentics used to be available in the 70s, they may sell well. Unfortunately, the choice of paints available on the market today may make a challenge to market a new line. Good point. I certainly have been advising them on what colours can be put together in sets. So, say for example, the obvious things is what set would you need to do RAF day fighters? So, kind of like 29, 30, 90, 106, 165, stuff like that. So it's we're trying to kind of like work things out at the moment, but it's very early stages. So let's have a look. There we go. We'll just put another coat on here now that I've turned FaceTime off. Ha ha ha. And we'll put another coat on this side here. In fact, that is already starting to that dark green that I actually kind of decanted, that's already started to dry up a bit. But yeah, you're getting a nice even coat there. The brush marks, you can brush them out. As you can see there, they do tend to even out ultimately. So yeah, I like the fact they do have a certain amount of leveling properties. But I know what you're all asking. I know what you're all thinking, folks. Can you airbrush them? Well, we shall see, shall we? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go for the 90 Sky. I call it 90 Sky. I think it's 90 Beige Green, but we'll call it 90 Sky. And we've got our basic Fender FE183 here, which is by no means an expensive airbrush. And what we're going to do is we're going to be very brave, and we're going to decant some into the cup, absolutely raw. So that's you're probably thinking, you madman, JM, that is way too thick, and you may well be right. But let's wait and see. So do a little bit of back flushing. Okay. Wow. There's a thing. Oh, let's get it on camera, shall we? There we go. Now I've flooded it a bit there. As you can see, it started to pull. That was purely that was user error there. So we'll, and that is one of the things with water-based acrylics, is if you go a bit too heavy on the trigger, they will flood onto the surface, then they will start pooling. But if you're a little bit more restrained, you can actually. Now, the weird thing about this is that when I put these into the cup originally, when I was testing various ratios, I actually ended up over thinning them originally. And in the end, I thought, well, I tell you what, let's just try putting this raw into the airbrush color cup to see whether it will actually spray or not. And it sprayed perfectly unthinned. And as you can see, that's going down really quite nicely, apart from that blob there that I did earlier on, but hey ho. Can you fine line them? Well, let's have a look. I'm just gonna, can you fine line them? I haven't. No, let's try opening the nozzle up a bit more. Yeah, I think the answer there is not easily. But what we'll do there is we'll add a couple of drops of the acrylic thinner and then see what we can do that way. The weird thing is this, when you put these in unthinned and you're spraying kind of large areas, it's not unlike, it kind of reminds me of VMS varnish. You put that in the airbrush and it's massively thick and you think, well, this is wrong. This is going to end in disaster. But actually, it ends up spraying really nicely and levels off. So what we're doing here is we're just, right. There we go. I've added a couple of drops of thinner to that. Oops, there we go. Gone mad there. Tell you what, I'll put the needle stopper in there. Always trial and error this, folks. Oops. What have I done there? I think we had a little bit of needle dry there, so you can do some fine lining. That's a little bit spattery, and I could probably do with thinning that a bit more, but it can be done. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't. I don't like using water-based acrylics for doing fine lining anyway. It's kind of like it's not really what their purpose is. So we'll try doing it a bit more here. Yeah, it's you're right on the limit of what you can do with water-based acrylics there. It can be done, and I think with a bit more practice and maybe putting some kind of retarders in, and perhaps messing around with thinning and pressure ratios, it can be done. It's not something I would choose to do because I don't think that is the strength of the paint itself. Now you see, look, I see where I thinned that, and now it's all just kind of like pooling and bleeding off. So, as I say, you can thin them, but you are then working against the integrity of the paint when it comes to doing kind of like large areas and things. So, but yeah, you certainly can do some fine lining of a sort, but I don't think that's working with the strength of these paints. Primarily, I would argue that their strength comes in being able to brush paint them and get decent results brush painting, rather than trying to go head to head with solvent acrylics and lacquer based paints. So you got to try these things. So let me just clean the airbrush out here a second. Oops, hello everybody. So let's just get all this stuff out of the airbrush. So yeah, it can be done, but I would argue that's not what you'd want to be using these paints for ultimately. Their strength is that they're generally non-toxic, and you can brush paint them in a home environment without worrying about fumes and smells and things. So right, let's just back flush this thing out. I'll just go for some more questions here. Yeah, Jim says looks like they work well for covering large areas with spraying. They do, Jim, they do, but as I say, I'm testing them out through the airbrush just to satisfy my own curiosity. But in general, I would argue that I don't think water-based acrylics are ideally suited for airbrushing. You can do it, but I just think that you need a slightly more aggressive solvent, either alcohol or lacquer, to do that, because you're always up against tip drying, needle drying, all that kind of stuff. So that would be my honest opinion on these things. But they can be airbrushed. They certainly can be airbrushed. Right, I'm just giving this a quick blast through here, and then we'll God, I'm getting through loads of kitchen roll tonight. Right, there we go. And the other thing with using water-based acrylics when you're airbrushing is that when you've finished spraying, you do have to kind of disassemble the airbrush and just do like a more thorough clean, because with water-based acrylics is once they get in there, you can get rid of them, but you are having to kind of like do a bit more of a deep clean. So what I'm doing here is, in order to make sure that my airbrush isn't going to have any nasty surprises for me further down the line, farther down the line, I'm just going to take the needle out, which, in fact, I don't know if you can see that. Let's pop over to the other camera. You can see where the paint has started to build up on the nozzle, on the needle there. So that's when you start having airbrushing problems. So we'll get that out, and then we will, to show you what I'm doing, I'll just give the nozzle a good clean. I'll just put some lacquer thinner in the cup there. And then what we'll do is we'll get a cotton bud and we'll do the same thing, a little bit of lacquer thinner in this lid here, and then we'll just go in there and clean that out like so. And then a little bit more of the lacquer thinner. Just resight the needle. Incidentally, I think it's about a year ago that we started trying these Fender airbrushes out, and we haven't replaced any of the bits in them. A year ago, was it 2 years ago? I can't remember, but we haven't replaced any of the bits in them, and they are still performing admirably. There we go. I'll just show you that. There we go. We've got that through there, and that's all nice and clean now. Yeah, that's fine. That's clear now. So, long story short, I will be continuing my experiments with these paints, and I will be messing around with mixing them and still going through lots of different kind of thinning ratios and things. I am, like I say, I'm using a bottle of their acrylic thinners improved, but I will be trying them with other thinning mediums like lacquer thinner, because that, believe it or not, pretty much can thin almost any paint, and I have used it on some Vallejo Air, of all things. You can actually thin Vallejo Air with it, and I'm going to see what happens if I try thinning them with alcohol. It probably won't work. And also, I'm just going to, I'll try airbrushing them with water, but I don't think that's going to work at all. I think it breaks the paint down too much when you're trying to airbrush it. But certainly the acrylic thinners does work. But we're going to carry on experimenting anyway. There we go. Jim says, my primary use for water-based acrylics is brush painting, particularly figure painting. Exactly, Jim. And that's what I tend to use water-based acrylics for as well. I know a lot of figure painters use them for underpinning colors. Then they go in there with kind of enamels or oils and things, and then and then go about it that way. David Ross says, all the best to Drew. Get well soon. Absolutely. And he says, hello from Inverness. Well, hello from Somerset. Thank you to everybody who's sending messages for Drew. He's just a bit under the weather, that's all. I'm sure he'll be back fighting fit on Sunday. Dave says, Dave Fleming says that he's had some. He says, I've had some for a couple of months and I'm quite impressed. And Paul Milligan says, they do look better. Bought a few first gen, didn't like consistency, not great for brush painting compared to Vallejo. Yeah, that was one of the things that I did feed back to them, is that they've got to be better for brush painting. They've got to cover, in quicker in terms of fewer coats, but also they need to be more opaque, but not dry on the brush. And that they seem to have conquered that at the moment. And like I say, bear in mind that. Bear in mind that I'm painting here today, and it's quite tropical here. It's tropical for Somerset at least. Mike asks, will it thin down to make a glaze? That's the next thing I am going to be trying to do, Mike, when it comes to figure painting and stuff. And John Patrick Huston says we can watch the paint dry. You literally can. This is the point. And Lucinda says, what you like to paint? I like to paint the town red, Lucinda. There we go. So that's it. It's kind of like, it's an experimentation process. But as I said, you can see what we've you can see there tonight where we've done some airbrushing of that sky on the back end there. And like I say, for Anthony's suggestion, that was the sky and the blue that we brush painted on the inside of that hole, and that's straight over raw plastic. And those are the two coats that we brush painted on the end there, and that's over dark colors like that dark red primer on the test mule here, and on the zero wing. We've got 3 coats of sky there, and we've got 2 coats of the light blue there. So, I think for people who are, kind of like brush painting, especially kind of like colors like dark green, dark earth, and sky, you can do it with these acrylics. We'll do one more thing with these acrylics, and then we'll just do a general Q&A. And what should we try doing? We'll try the 78 matte, which is cockpit green. And what we will do is we'll apply it over the colors that we've already done. So we'll do it over the dark blue, the light blue rather. It's been a long day, and I'm very hot. Well, I don't like to brag. So there we go. Let's get you back onto the workshop camera here. So there we go. That's the cockpit green straight out of the bottle. I haven't thinned it or anything. And we'll just, whoops, probably a little bit too much on the brush there. And we'll just brush it out onto the end of that wing. As you can see, that goes down rather smoothly. Probably a little bit too much on the brush there. But as I say, 2 thin coats are better than 1 thick one. So yeah, we'll probably want another coat on the on the model ultimately. In fact, I'll tell you what, I think we've got a bit of raw plastic in the middle there, so we'll put a little bit of this interior green in there as well. But as I say, what I like about these paints is that when you're putting them on, they're not dragging. They don't start drying too quickly. And so it does give you that little bit of time to work out work the brush strokes out before that it really starts painting. So there you go. That's that interior green, and that's gone over the raw plastic in the middle of that that wing there. So that's what happens when you there you go, folks. That's what happens when you spray paint when it's far too warm. So we're not doing any testing on that underside there. That was an old can of grey primer I had somewhere, and boy, that was a couple of years ago. That went wrong. That went wrong very quickly. So we're not going to be doing that. So we will be doing some more experimentation. Here's the Spitfire that I've been using as a test mule, and that's where I was just trying out different thinning ratios, brush thinning ratios, and that's where I was just doing, trying out the sky and everything. Here are two of the greys. I think that's the medium sea grey, and I think that's the light gold grey. But again, light greys can be very tricky colours to lay down in decent coats, and those have gone down very nicely. So I'm sure we'll have ups and downs trying these out and pushing them to the limits of what you can do with them. But so far, I'm not having any of the problems I usually have trying to brush, certain brands of water-based acrylics. I think the only brand that I have consistency in, being able to use them for brush painting is, surprise, surprise, it's Vallejo. It's the model color, and it's also their Panzer Aces. But these are performing good. I think I'm confident enough that once more colors turn up that are in tune with some of the things I'm working on, I will actually use them use them properly to to see what we can do with them. So yeah, in that respect, I'm interested to see, especially some of the things like field grey and stuff like that, is what we can do. How much we can paint with those. Mike Williams says, do they plan any gloss colors? Would they give better leveling properties? Don't know at the moment, Mike. I'll go away and ask. That's a very good point. I know gloss paints can be an absolute bind to brush, especially in the hands of kind of less experienced modelers. Jim Ortcott says, I'm impressed with how smooth they go down via brush painting. Yeah, well, this is what I've been trying to do, is rather than me testing paint, as Johnny M wanting, the kind of things I expect from the paints that I use, which is the alcohol-based and the lacquer-based paints, which I primarily use for airbrushing. I'm trying to sit and kind of think, right, I'm somebody who's never brush painted a model before. How easy are these to use from a relatively kind of low level of experience? And I think somebody with very limited experience can actually have good results, more than good results, as long as they follow the basics of basic brush painting craft. You shouldn't really have any problems. And Anthony Bird says, bearing in mind the heat tonight, I think if you were a new starter, you would get some good results from these paints without having to buy special thinners, special primer. A good result from Humbrol, in my view. Yeah, like I say, they're brushing straight out of the bottles very well. But the thing you will find is that some colors will brush and airbrush fine as they are. Some will require a little bit of thinning. Some colors, no matter what you do, you have to apply more coats. It's just the nature of paints and pigments and things. And Jeff's put up a link for the acrylic paints, which we'll put up on the page at the end of the show anyway. Yeah, I'm, like I say, once I get some colors here that are in tune with some of the things I'm actually working on, then I really will be pushing them a bit more to see what I can do with them. Certainly the next project I do with anything RAF or Fleet Air Arm based, I'll be using that quite a bit. And one of the other things I have requested to Humbrol is that I've asked them to look at reformulating 30 dark green, because I think anybody who uses the current 30 dark green, whether it's the acrylic or the enamel, it's not the right color. It's somewhere down the years, it ended up going a very cold blue, dark green, almost like dark sea green. It's not right. RAF dark green actually hasn't changed that much since the Second World War. So ironically, there is in the range 163 dark green, which is modern RAF dark green, and that is, you know, that is a superb match for that slightly olivey, warmer, almost like a brownish dark green, whereas the Humbrol 30 is far too blue and it's far too cold. And I can always tell models that I see online that have been painted with Humbrol 30 because it is just, to my eye, it's just off. And like I say, I am trying to see if they can actually go in there and reformulate that color so that it's actually, well, essentially use the same color formulation that you've got for 163 dark green and put that into Humbrol 30. And Jim says, can you test the paints that you applied straight over raw plastic? Did that tonight, Jim. And in fact, we've, as you can see on the workshop camera, there's the cockpit number 78 cockpit green. That was brushed straight over raw plastic there. And we also did, that's one coat. And we also did tonight on the inside of this hull, that's one coat of Humbrol 90, and that's one coat of Humbrol 65, and that's straight over raw plastic. So, I mean, I will do some more tests. I just need to dig out some more scabby kits that I can, you know, I can use as paint mules. But compared to previous attempts to brush paint some of the Humbrol acrylics, pretty much these are the best results I've had so far. So, yeah. I think the best thing to say is when these come out is you know, try them yourself and see what results you've got. I'm trying not to do anything fancy with them. I'm not using any secret ingredients. I'm not using you know, other brand drying retarders or anything like that. For the most part, I have thinned them with if I've thinned them with tap water, or like I say, I've got some of the acrylic thinners that they're testing here at the moment, or in many instances, I haven't even thinned them at all. I've just straight onto raw plastic. Should we do one more test? I'm just having a look to see if I've got. He's looking around his workshop here to look for a likely candidate as a test mule. Bear with me. Bum bum bum. Here's a test mule. This is my Fujimi Mini Cooper that I started building last year, and I absolutely balked the paintwork on it. So I've been kind of like keep thinging it back and whatever. But what we'll do is we'll put some acrylic paint on that roof, and there is that. That is a challenge because that's dark green plastic, and we're going to be putting a color over the dark green plastic. What color shall we try applying over dark green? And I'm thinking we should go with, I think we should go with one of the greys. What do you reckon? 129, 128, or 165 medium sea grey? I think we should go with 165 medium sea grey. So that's raw plastic. That's raw plastic that's been stripped and polished and thinned, and God knows what I've done to that. I really should get a wiggle on with this, because this was going to be built for Mr. Andrew Hills of Antics in Bristol, and yeah, I need to. I was going to build my car, my Mini, but I just absolutely fouled up the paintwork, and in the end, I thought, do you know what I'll do? I'll build it as a kind of like a junkyard find. Which at the moment is my Mini. So anyway, so we've given that a good stir, and now look how thick that's coming out. That almost looks like Derp's Licky Licks. Mustn't say that too loudly. You'll be coming in here and wanting some Licky Licks. So we'll brush some of this on neat, and then we might go in and brush some, thin it out a bit more. So there we go. There's our roof. So now Chris Ellis once said that if you try painting yellow paint over dark green plastic, what you'll end up with is yellow streaks over dark green. And actually that still holds true these days. This is a really tricky color to we're putting a light grey over a dark green plastic. But I'm just working it at the moment to see when the bite point is before it starts drying too much. So there we go. That's 165 medium sea grey. So your first coat is going to be streaky because you're putting a light colour over a dark background. In this case, a very, very dark background. But we're going to give that if we don't do it live tonight, we'll certainly put another coat on and then show you what the results are. But that you probably need to have probably 2 coats to get even coverage, probably 3. But the one thing is that what this acrylic isn't doing, it isn't beading or pooling on the surface, which is a problem you do get sometimes with brush painting certain acrylics. So we'll let that dry for a bit longer. We'll put another coat somewhere else on this roof. We'll put another coat just there. This model will be heading towards the oven cleaner at some stage because I need to get every last scrap of the previous colours out from every nook and cranny and then start again. But because I've decided I'm building this one as a, literally as kind of like a junkyard find or a project, a project in progress itself, there will be areas that will be in red primer. There'll be areas which are a little bit rusty. I'm looking at you, A panels. I don't know if you can see that. You can see the little rust hole on the A panel there. Tell me about it. And yeah, so this is going to be more like a restoration car in progress. So yeah, light grey paint over dark green. It's always going to go on a bit streaky, but that's once it starts drying, it starts drying. So we will brush on and rush on another coat before the show ends tonight. Whoops, a bit too much there. Like I say, the beauty of water-based acrylics is that because they don't have any really aggressive solvents, you can brush another coat on. Once it's touch dry, you can brush another coat on and it doesn't start attacking the underlying layer. And there we go, look, 2 coats. And that's already looking much better. You probably want 3 on there, but compare that to that, it shows you the covering power of these acrylics. So no faking, folks. We've done it live on the internet tonight. So there we go. So let's play catch up with some comments. Let's have a look. 165. Yeah, Mike, that's 165 medium sea grey. Anthony says, Licky Licks at £1 at Morrison's recently. Okay, don't let Dirt know that. He says that almost becomes your primer coat. What, the Licky Licks, really? Okay. No, I see what you mean. Yeah, so we're, like I say, this is, although I haven't had much time in the workshop to trying to get on with some actual model building at the moment, but I have been in the workshop doing, like I say, doing tests of paints and things. And there you go. You can see how that's light grey over dark green plastic. That is a very unforgiving test. And you can see there's our first coat, there's our second coat. So I would imagine that a beginner shouldn't have that many problems with this. Fingers crossed they shouldn't have that many problems. But like I say, we're going to carry on testing these paints. So goodness me, we've already eaten up an hour. Would you believe it? And Anthony says, Jean, do I know if these issues in sets or will they be launched as individual bottles? I think they're going to be individual bottles, but I don't think I'm breaking any trade secrets by saying that I am currently kind of like advising them on what things can go together in certain sets. So certain colors, like for example, say if you do a 6-color set, you have dark green, dark earth, sky, ocean grey, medium sea grey, and probably black. and that's the basics that you'd need for doing RAF day fighters, or indeed bomber command. So, you know, I'm trying to kind of like advise on things like that, but certainly they will be available. I think they're going to be doing individually, certainly. But still a lot of testing and you know, things to try out here. One of the other things I am going to advise them is, because when you look at the that, say that's the current acrylics, and that's the second gen ones there. Oops, daisy, let's get these around the right way around. The one thing I am going to advise them is, I think, let's do it on the camera. Goodness me, I'm an amateur. What I'm going to advise them is, I think the second gen, you've got that little blue flash there that says second gen, but I think this swoosh at the bottom here needs to have a different color, or that the caps are a different color. They need to have something on them which immediately from a distance makes them jump out as being absolutely new paints. I'm tempted to say perhaps keep the red swoosh, but have that there as a black and gold border, something that makes the paint stand out. But like I say, that's just my opinion. I'm feeding back my opinion. There's certainly some visual differences between the first gen and the second gen. And like I say, the second gen they actually are marked up as second gen. Me personally, I would like to lose the red and have a different color, but that's just my opinion. So anyway, and Anthony says, how's your workshop rebuild going? Oh, it's going nowhere at the moment, Anthony. Not until I get issues resolved, I think, say issues resolved with building societies that lose all your documentation. So anyway, on that note, on that happy note, we will be back on, I think we're back on Sunday. Yeah, we should be back on Sunday. Hopefully we'll all be back, or some of us, or parts of us will be back. Yeah, there we go. Mike Williams says, I think the link that Jeff has put up, there are gloss and satin colors available too. The problem I have is that when this link comes up like that, I can't actually click it because it just doesn't come up as an active link. But and Mike Richardson says, hello all. The one time I tried airbrushing the original Humber Acrylic 90, it seriously clogged the airbrush. It seems to have loads of little lumps in it. Second gen sounds much better. Yeah, the one thing I would say though about airbrushing any water-based acrylic, or in fact airbrushing anything, quite frankly, is and I know this is taking it out of the remit of people who are beginners, but we're talking about a slightly more advanced technique here. But I would say anybody who's airbrushing acrylics is just get some lacquer thinners, whether it's Gunzi or not Gunzi, whether it's Mr. Hobby or whether it's Tamiya. Lacquer thinner is your friend. You got to be a bit careful with it, wear masks, and you know, and kind of like wear gloves if you're using it for prolonged periods. But lacquer thinner, it will get any paint out of an airbrush, and it will keep the innards of an airbrush kind of lubricated as well. And that's what I did tonight. Was once I finished using my cheapo Fengder airbrush here, I flushed it out with lacquer thinner. I then took the needle out, cleaned the needle. I've cleaned the nozzle. I've gone in there, cleaned the color cup. I've then flushed it out again. I've back flushed it, and also we've got a little bit of thinner. You can see we leave in there, which just keeps everything in there kind of lubricated for the next time we need to use it. And yeah, that's, anybody doesn't know, that's my Fengder airbrush. One of my Fengder airbrushes I bought last year for £25. Still doing a job. It's really quite a remarkable airbrush. It really is. And oh yeah, Stan says that's not the second gen catalog, right? Okay, I'm going in blind. I'll have to have a look on the website and see what's out there. As far as I know, I don't think the second gens are out there, but we'll double check anyway. It's been a busy week. I got the other thing I was going to say was, at some stage, bit of self promotion here. At some stage, the Airfix Workbench webcast, I'm in it, which is good news or bad news, depending on if you've ever watched our shows here. So that was good fun to do. I was chatting to Luke and Dale, and we were chatting about the process of you know, putting together decals and things. We ran out of time, as always. But yeah, it was good fun. So I'm looking forward to doing another one as well. And Anthony says, really interesting, informative show tonight, as they always are. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much for taking the time to show us this new item from Humbrol. Not a problem. No, not at all. Like I say, I've got them here, so it behoves me to to actually talk about them. In fact, before we go, let's have one more coat. Oops, we've lost our. There we go. My OBS has decided to bomb out on me. So let's do one more coat of the of this. And what I am going to do, this is a slight cheat here, folks. What I am going to do is grab some Scotch-Brite when I can find some. There we go. The Modeller's Friend, a bit of Scotch-Brite. I'm just going to grab some Scotch-Brite and I'm just going to go in there. This is twofold. One, this is to key the surface for that next coat of paint. But the other thing is, as I say, I've got my nail there, or what passes the nail on my fingers. I'm trying to scratch that paint off. It's marking the surface, but what it's not doing is it's not scratching the paint. And I'll tell you what else we'll do for a giggle. Gonna regret doing this. I'm going to put a bit of masking tape on there. I'm a hostage to fortune here. I'm going to rip this off and I'm probably going to take half the paint with me. So 1, 2, 3. Okay. Bear in mind, you saw me paint that live tonight on raw plastic. So let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. Okay. One last coat of the 165 dark medium sea grey, and then that's it for tonight. I have another show to prepare, so let's just pop that in there like so. So that really is quite thick, that really is quite a thick paint. But what we're going to do this time is we are going to thin it. And not with that, because that's lacquer thinner. There we go. 2 drops of the Humbrol acrylic thinner. There we go, that's quite nice. And we'll just brush that on there like so. So that acrylic thinner really does make the paint nice and creamy. And it just makes it brush. You can feel it. You can just feel it kind of gliding over the surface. And you can see where it's a little bit, where we've got a little bit of raw plastic in between, that it's still being a bit streaky. But where we're putting it over the established coats, in fact, we'll just do that side as well while we're at it, and then we can brush out everything else. So that little bit of thinner just slows the paint drying down a little bit more, and it should enable the paint to then level out a bit more. But as you saw just then, that was only applied, oops, let's get it on camera. That was only applied a few minutes ago, and already I was able to put masking tape on it over raw plastic and try and rip the paint off, and I couldn't do it. So there we go. That'll do for tonight. If you tuned in tonight, we'll probably go in and do the edited version for the YouTube channel, which means we can then edit out the interruptions. And like I say, this is what we're trying to do now is keep the recordings on YouTube, and the ones that are on Facebook and Twitter, once they're broadcast, they've gone. So keep an eye out on YouTube for the edited version. Until then, we will be back on Sunday, fingers crossed. As always, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and we'll see you very soon. So bye for now.